Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rich Doc, Poor Doc. So today we thought we would talk about.
The power of focus.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
So, yeah, one thing that I think's really helped Kenji and I is about 3 years ago, I think it is now, that we read this book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And it really talked to us a lot about the power of focus. And what brings it up on the podcast today is that I've been struggling a little bit with focus the last week or two, especially with our blog work, and just feeling overwhelmed and ending up with these long to-do lists and just feeling like I'm running in 5 directions at once. And one thing that's been really, really helpful to me is sitting down whiteboarding with Kenji and thinking about what the priorities are, and then just making sure to focus on what I can get to. So we thought that would be a really useful thing to discuss, because it really is, I think, one of the core principles that helps people be successful and helps people achieve this kind of rich doc lifestyle that we're talking about, is being able to focus on the important things and move towards taking action instead of just trying to do 15 things at once that are totally unimportant.
Yeah, we thought maybe we would kind of run through going back in time for us and how we've used focus in our life, and how it's allowed us to be successful. And so maybe the first thing that I can think about is some of our businesses that that we had and that we sold since. One business that we did was around clinical documentation, and it's such an obscure topic. But again, the power of focus here is that we focus so much on that topic that we really became the experts in it actually quite quick, pretty quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
We not many physicians were talking about it. We wrote journal articles. We were asked to kind of submit publications. We were asked to speak conferences, and very quickly we became experts. And I think for me, one of the most important things about focusing on that topic was that prior to that, when I used to work at a consulting company called McKinsey, and that when you work at McKinsey, one of the things that they do is they kind of throw you in to the C-suite, or the in front of the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and you're like in your late 20s, early 30s, and they kind of expect you to be able to lead that meeting, and it's pretty intimidating, right? It's pretty intimidating to kind of sit there in front of somebody who's running $1 billion organization, and so what I realized from that experience, because again, I was not comfortable in that situation. I'm not even going to pretend to say that I was, but when we were doing that business, right, it was very different. I could actually go in and talk to a CEO and I did. I actually spoke to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, and actually 25 of his direct reports. So the CFO, the chief operating officer, chief medical officer, and there was no fear. I mean, it was because I think of the focus, feeling so confident about the material, knowing what I was going to say, and again, I think it's an example of the power of focus in our business, right?
Right. And the same goes for our real estate business.
Right.
We really, when we started out, we knew we wanted to target cash flowing rentals, and we didn't have a whole lot of money. So it wasn't like we were going to go buy a 30 unit apartment building, right? We really focused on small multifamily, BC class, 1970s, 1980s build, duplexes and fourplexes, and really got into that niche and learned it very, very well, and became very successful because we focused so much.
Yeah.
Um,
I think another example, kind of more recently with our blog is, we I think it was in the beginning of 2018, we said, or maybe it was 2019 actually, where we said, what's the one thing that we can do here to really grow our blog, right? And so what we decided was, and it just boiled down, it was amazing. It was boiled down to one thing, which was, hey, let's build some relationships. Let's get to know people in the space, right? And build relationships with them. And, and that has been just the most amazing kind of
Right.
thing. I mean, just that, and it wasn't
Because I mean, they want to help us
right.
because they know us now, and they know who we are and what we are trying to deliver to our people. They know that we want to deliver value, and so they want to help us, and it's allowed us to be able to reach other people's readers that we never would have been able to reach if we hadn't created relationships with them.
Yeah, and then also, in terms of like, guiding and mentoring us, right? That they, they've been
Hmm.
successful, or they've demonstrated that they can be successful doing, being a blogger or creating a brand. And so, yeah, so I mean, we've learned so much from them, just being able to, being able to be around them, listen to their ideas, see what they're doing, and so again, if we didn't have that closeness, that relationship, that then I don't think those opportunities would have been there. So yeah, just another example of saying to yourself, like, what's the one thing that I can do? And you can really apply this to anything, right? You can actually apply it to whatever you're doing, right? What's the one thing that I can do that's going to really move the needle? And then also, like not only in the macro sense, but you can also do it in the micro sense, which is kind of what happened more recently, like the last 1 or 2 weeks. Letia is struggling with just a kind of literally a huge list of to-dos, right? And so what we did was we sat down, we said, okay, let's start out with what is our goal, right? What are we trying to achieve, right?
And that's
What's
beginning with the outcome in mind.
Right, right. And so we said, okay, what's our goal? Let's start with that, okay? And so we ended up coming up with like two goals that we said, okay, these are our two goals for the next 2 months, let's say. And then from there, we said, okay, if that's our goal, let's then the next step is let's list everything that is on your to-do list,
Hmm.
and then take each one of those and say, okay, is this one goal helping us, or is this one to-do helping us achieve these one or two of these goals, right? And if they weren't, or if it could be delegated, we got it off the list, right? And so that, I think, was actually, it was actually helpful for me too, just to kind of even like, periodically kind of saying, okay, what is your main goal, right? Like, what are you trying to push?
Hmm.
And then I have my own separate goals that I'm pursuing for our blog businesses, for our real estate portfolio. And it's really helpful to periodically kind of say to yourself, okay, what is our goal, and what are the one or two things that I need to do to move the needle on this? And again, that's if you can do that every day, if you can move the needle on something every day, and it can just be one thing, you'll make a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I think going back to Gary Keller's book, The one thing we got out of that is he said, he used to do a lot of coaching with executives and really high level people in their businesses, and he would give them a long list of to dos, and then he would end up following back with them a couple weeks later, and they wouldn't get anything done. And it was only once he got down to the point that it was just he'd give them only one thing to do, they could actually do that one thing, and that's when they started to move the whole business forward. And he thinks about it in terms of like, what's the outcome I want down the road? And this could be, years down the road. And then he can start to build up the steps. And he almost describes it as dominoes, actually. He says, you do the one thing today that puts that domino down, and that domino can hit down the next domino, which is 50% bigger. And so you have this ultimate outcome in mind, and you just figure out all the little dominoes that you need to knock down in the meantime. And so that's what we basically think about. We think about our real estate portfolio, for example, like, what's our outcome? Well, we want to build our real estate portfolio to create as much cash flow as possible and as much value as possible, so we can do all these contribution things that we want to do, so that we can, build our blog, so we can, that's ultimately our big source of funding for everything that we do. And so we want to build that up. Well, how do we do that? What's the one thing we can do to build up our real estate portfolio? Well, really, it's like buy new properties. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? We could make our properties perform better, and that'll take it up a level. But ultimately, the one thing that's going to add the most value to our real estate portfolio is buying more properties. And so then the next question becomes, how do you buy more properties, right?
Right,
And
right.
then it becomes clear you need more money, right? Then you go searching for money.
Well, interestingly, my one thing for our properties is actually, and maybe I'm thinking about it from a perspective of like our current portfolio. You're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, you're actually thinking about it more in terms of like, what will give us more freedom, right? But when I think about, because I'm managing our properties, so like, and that's my responsibility. So when I think about our existing properties, the way I think about it is, how do I create the best living environment for our tenants? How do we attract the best tenants, and how do we create the best community and living experience for them? That's kind of how I'm thinking about it, because otherwise, if I'm just like a landlord or slumlord or whatever it is, like that's just not satisfying for me to really enjoy it, right, and to kind of feel fulfilled by it. I have to be creating or adding value to people's lives, right? And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. So from there, it becomes a fairly kind of simple list. You want to create a really nice environment for them, right? You want to try to think about ways to build community, right? And so there's a lot of kind of things you can, it really kind of flows nicely from there. When you choose that one thing, the answers become very clear what you're going to focus on and prioritize.
Right. And that's really cool because that allows you to see there's a one thing for this week and for this month, and a one thing for the 10 years down the road.
Right,
Right.
right,
I think one of the things you just pointed out is it's about asking yourself questions,
right,
right? Because you're asking yourself, what is the way that I can, make the situation best for my tenants? How can I make their experience really, really great? And so all of this starts with questions, actually, and sitting down and having thinking time where you think through the questions. And I think that's why the whiteboard has been so useful for us, is because we sit down with the whiteboard and we just ask ourselves, okay, what's the one thing that we can do? What's the most important thing for our blog? And then you lay that out. What's the most important thing? And then you start to work backwards and figure out how to get there. Right.
right, right, for sure. Yeah. I mean, one last thing that maybe a little bit different topic, but I think one of the other things that I think that is helpful before you actually sit down and think about goals and whatnot is to actually ask yourself the question, like, what's going really well, right? And then I remember we did this. We were like, I think we were getting a little frustrated where we
Mm-hmm.
were overwhelmed, right? So when you feel that way, a great way to kind of get yourself into the right mindset to start thinking about, okay, what are my priorities and what's most important, is to actually ask yourself, okay, what's going on, what's going really well. And then I remember, if you probably remember, I kept asking you, okay, what's going really well? You would
Yeah.
tell me one thing, and then I would say, no, okay, what's going really well? I kept asking that question probably about 30 times.
Right, because I
And,
was just
and
in a very overwhelmed
right,
state of feeling like stressed out and pulled 15 different directions at once. And that was so great because it allowed me to focus on all these things that were going phenomenally that I wasn't looking at, because I was looking at all these things that weren't where I wanted them to be. And because of that, I was getting stalled. Right. But when I was able to see all the things I was accomplishing and all the ways I had moved forward in the last couple of weeks, it actually allowed me to kind of quiet my mind, that kind of critical mind that's telling you you're not doing enough or you're not doing this well, and see that actually there is a balance here, and you tend to focus on the negative, not the positive. And so that was really, really helpful, was
yeah,
asking that question.
all right.
Well, hopefully that was a helpful way to think about focus. And I'm sure it will come up again because it's such a vital part of, again, being successful and having that rich doc lifestyle. And so don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And if you like it, leave us a 5-star review. And we'll be back with you next week.